Hello again. If you have forgotten because your brains are so overloaded with all the information we're dumping into them, I'm Lindsay. I'm a grad student right now with the McCoss Lab. And just a few short years ago, I was an experimentalist. And pretty much the most programming and statistics background I had was opening up Excel and maybe adding a couple columns together. And pretty much everything else, I went to the Car Lab's resident statistician and said, can you please make pretty plots of my data because I have a poster to print in an hour. So if this is the first time you've ever really done any programming, if this is the first language that you're being introduced to, it's okay if you start feeling a little bit lost, and I tried to give you as many resources as possible. You might notice in your little MSstats tutorial thing on your thumb drive, under tutorials, we've got MSstats here. We're going to be starting off with the MSstats folder. If we get there, I'd love to show you the calibration curve stuff that Olga had just introduced you to. But you may notice in here I've got a PDF. If you were to open up that PDF already, you might have noticed it's got some code in there, it's got some figures in there, and it's got a lot of text. It's like 30 pages long. It's really just the notes that I'm going to be giving you verbally in case you wanted to go back and see what I was talking about. You could follow along with those notes. The .csv file is the data that we're going to be working with today. You're actually already familiar with this data. This is the rat heart data that Brendan was working you through yesterday. So all I did was export that out of Skyline. And then finally what we're going to be focusing on is this .r. So first, I'm going to ask you guys to navigate to wherever your R Studio has gotten installed. To find it for me, I just pressed the window key and started typing in R Studio, and it popped right up at the top here. So this step 0 is the hardest step. It's just getting the environment set up so that you can start doing cool things in R. So when you opened up your R, maybe you got something that looked like this. If you're feeling pretty good, you can look up at me. If you need a little bit more time, maybe give me a panicked look and shake your head strongly. Everyone doing okay so far? So what I'm going to do is, just like if I was in any of the Microsoft Office tools, I'm just going to open an existing file. And I'm going to navigate through here to that USB drive, to the tutorial, down to that MSstats folder, the MSstats folder inside the MSstats folder, and that .r script. Everyone finding it okay? This is in R Studio. So R Studio is just sitting on top of R, the programming language, and it's just going to let us visualize things a little bit easier. If you feel very comfortable in R and you want to do this all on the console, that's great. All right, everyone ready to open, or maybe you already opened? So another pane just opened up. So now we kind of have four windows going on here. In the top left, this is that R script. So this is all R code that I've already written. On the bottom left is the console. If you were to just open up your command prompt, your console, this is what you would get. You would get something that looks like this bottom left pane. In the top right, once we start reading in data and assigning variables, you're going to see this list up here populate. So we don't have anything in there for now. And then in the bottom right, we've got a whole bunch of different tabs down here. It might have opened up for you on this File Explorer, which just looks a lot like a regular File Explorer. And then you see some of the other tabs here include things like plots, which you might have deduced when we make plots. They will show up in the plots pane. We've got packages, which hopefully you've got a whole bunch of packages that are going to be installed here. We're going to go through that one more time just in case you didn't get a chance to. A help pane, and finally a viewer. So let's move over to that top left pane where hopefully you've got that MSstats_r.r file. And you're going to see a whole bunch of pound signs and basics of R. Everyone looking good so far? Any panicked looks? I don't see too many panicked looks yet. We're doing pretty good. All right. So you may notice I've already got some comments written in here. So the very first comment that I've got in here is that the pound sign indicates something as a comment. Anything that's a comment is not going to run in the code. It's just there for you to know what that code is doing. So I will encourage you right off the bat, whenever you're doing anything in R or coding anything in whatever language is your favorite, comment as much as possible. If you'd like to comment in this document yourself, please feel free to add your own comments in your own words to help you remember what we're doing and why we're doing it. Let's try running line 7 that says print hello. To run this, I just put my cursor next to it and I'm going to hit Control Enter. And you might have noticed some stuff popped up in that console down at the bottom. The first one is the hardest. So I'm just going to take a minute, come around and see if anybody needed help. If you see your neighbor maybe trying something strange. Yeah, no? Someone delete the line already? I think that was the first thing I did when I sat in my first art class. I was like, excuse me, I just deleted your whole script. Doing okay so far? So hopefully what you saw was kind of this side arrow open caret that just rewrote that line 7 from above in our R script window. And then you may notice in brackets 1, and then it says hello. So we've got our input line, and then it gave us our output from that line. So the next most useful thing in R, at least I think the most useful thing, is the question mark. If you run question mark, so Control Enter, you might have noticed that the output didn't pop out in that console window. It was that lower right-hand pane that changed. And now your Help tab is highlighted. And you see this whole thing down here of documentation. So if you wanted, there's an option right here, a little icon pretty much right underneath the packages, that you can pop that out and read to your heart's content. The documentation in R is pretty good, so if you're ever seeing any commands that you have no idea what that command is doing, writing a question mark and then that command right after it will give you a whole bunch of documentation on what you just ran and why you ran it. So we can try, for example, what does the plus sign do? And you notice we get all of this documentation on what the plus sign did. Another helpful tool is you can search for words, not just commands, by putting 2 question marks. So if I run the 2 question marks with help, here's everywhere, apparently, that help comes up in our documentation. If you wanted, I'm not sure why you would, but if you wanted, you can run R as just a regular calculator. So if I put my cursor down on line 28 down here, 3 to the 3, and I do Control Enter, my console updates with the input and then the output. I can try that again with a different formula. It gives me the output. So this is something you could play around with more yourself. Feeling pretty good so far. So really quickly, we could also assign variables. You may notice, if you are familiar with R, that in these tutorials I did not use the canonical R assigner. Canonically, R uses kind of this weird like open caret dash arrow thing to assign. And I think that might be a little confusing if you're not like super familiar with R as a language, because usually when we think of programming and we think of assigning variables, it's an equal sign. So I have chosen intentionally to only use the equal sign in these tutorials. So if I do x equals 5 and I run that, you notice the input just repeats that code back to me and says, cool, x equals 5. If I do y equals 2, does the same thing. If I do x times y, it gives me a number. You have probably deduced at this point, we just assigned the variable x to the value 5, the variable y to the value 2. So when we multiply these two variables together, it's given us the answer to that. We could also assign variables as strings, so a sentence of characters. So if I assign the variable test to this string hello world, and then I press enter, the R console says cool, test equals hello world. And now if I do print test, it says print the variable test, and the variable test is hello world, so it gives me the output of hello world. So that was an extremely brief, cursory, surface level scratching of R, and we're going to be diving straight in after this. But there are so many resources out there if you wanted to get more comfortable with coding from scratch. For now, we're going to go down to where there's all the pound signs and it says MSstats. We're going to start with step 0, prerequisites. Now you might be looking at this and you're like, wow, Lindsay, we just made a huge leap from multiplying x times y, and now I don't know what any of this means down here. I will remind you again, if at any point you're curious what some of these commands are, we can do that question mark. For example, this first line on 70 is install.packages. We can do question mark install.packages. What does this even do? Press enter, and then we'll get our documentation. So if at any point you have no idea what this function is doing, you can use the question mark. For the most part, these functions are pretty well labeled. So install.packages, you may have figured out installs packages. If you haven't already installed these packages, I'm just going to put my cursor on this line, install packages, and do Control Enter. You may notice a bunch of red, angry red output going on down here. Don't panic, that's okay. that's just the system telling you I'm doing so many things right now. You may also notice while the blue bar is loading, there's a little stop sign up here. That means the console is currently running a bunch of code. It's still running a bunch of code. So we've got that stop sign there saying, I'm still going, I'm still going. If you want to kill what I'm doing, you can press the stop sign, but I would discourage you right now from pressing the stop sign. So we know we're done running that line 70 of code because we get our little input caret down here back. Our stop sign went away. We're ready for the next line. So what we just did was install a bunch of packages from this repository called CRAN. Next up, we're going to install some more packages from a repository called Bioconductor. So first we need to set the source of where these packages are going to come from. And you may notice I got one line of output down here on the console that says, okay, I'm going to do that thing you just told me to do. I can start loading some more of these packages. You may see a little message pop up in your console that says update all, some, none. I'm going to go ahead and just type A in the console. Yeah, I will get this started and I will start coming around and seeing what your error messages say.
Unexpected.
Whoa. So if you've still got some errors, don't panic. I'll be coming around. I'm going to get us just to the end of this section so that we can see who is truly in need of help. Yeah, so if you can run 75 and then 76. I'm just going to get to the end of this section. A good way to check if you're good or not is at the end of this little section, once you get to 85, if you do question mark MSstats and your help pane tells you about MSstats, then you are golden for this section and you have put your oxygen mask on and you are ready to help the person next to you. Yes.
So install packages, it says that directory.
Yes, this is my personal directory. So in 79, line 79, you will need to point this to wherever your download is. Yep. So I just ran line 75, Bioc Lite. I ran Bioc Lite and installed these 4 packages. And now in line 79, it says C users Pino. You will have to change this location to your computer. So for example, this computer I'm on right now is not my computer. So I'm doing this real time with you guys. So I had to change Pino here that I've highlighted with the cursor. I had to change that to what this computer is called. So this computer, if I open up the downloads folder and the MSstats download, you can see location. This computer is C users presenter downloads. So if you need help to find where the file is, it's just at MSstats.org. MSstats. If you scroll down here, there's a big green button if you need to get it still. MSstats.org.
So once that's downloaded, where do we put that?
Once it's downloaded, you can leave it right in the downloads folder. Once you download it, leave it in that folder. You don't have to double click it or anything.
Yeah.
You're going to just change this line of code where it says C users presenter downloads. Change this location to wherever your downloads folder is.
Basically,
so probably
where the MSstats file is.
where you downloaded it, correct.
It's not the same one that's showing up where it says the downloaded binary packages or anything.
You can change the directory if you want. I'm going to, I think some of the problems we might be having is it looks like some people have downloaded an MSstats package for yesterday's group comparisons in Skyline, and maybe you're pointing to the external tool and not to the 3.7.3 package. So just double check and see if that's going to solve your problem.
You can try that. If you're saying you have library problems, when you try to do the next line, it says library. Oh, that's all you're supposed to do. I thought it was like run something. Okay. Okay. Perfect.
I'm so stuck.
So just let me give you guys one more tool. It looks like a lot of the problems many of you are having is because of that Skyline external tool. So if you could go type in remove packages, MSstats, and remove that. And try installing MSstats from the start.